He wasn't just some poor little innocent kid that went astray. He killed 4 people.
How'd you muster up those tears?
I feel horrible about what I did.
Yeah, so horrible to say, I may have to stab myself.
Why did you keep the heads? Why did you cut them off, and why did you keep them?
Something out of my childhood.
The story begins with Brenda Spencer, born in 1962 in San Diego, California. Her early life was unstable, and she lived in difficult conditions with her father after her parents separated.
Like he would touch me inappropriately.
Over time, those around her noticed troubling behavior, including isolation, depression, and a growing fixation on violence. In the period leading up to the incident, her interest in dangerous actions became more visible. She had access to a weapon, which would later play a central role in the case.
We had to go see her in court, testify against her. So it does take it robs you of your youth and your innocence at that age.
On January 29th, 1979, a Monday morning, people gathered outside Grover Cleveland Elementary School in San Diego, waiting for the school day to begin. From a house across the street, Spencer positioned herself near a window overlooking the school. She then began using the weapon toward the area, causing immediate panic. 2 adults, Principal Burton Ragg and custodian Mike Sucker, had lost their lives while trying to protect others. Several others were injured. One survivor, Cam Miller, later shared what that moment felt like.
All of a sudden, I went numb on the left side and I blacked out. And one of my neighbors took me around to the school staff, and that's where they discovered I'd been shot. I was an inch away from my heart, and it went clear through my back, from the back to the front. Unfortunately, it missed all my organs and any internal parts. It is a little eerie to see somebody that almost killed me. She's a loose cannon, and I think the whole community would be in danger, and you never know whether she'll go after somebody who's testified against her, and you just never know what her mindset is going to be. This is reality, and if you can keep her behind bars and help one other person who's gone through something like this, it makes it all worth it for me.
After the incident, Spencer remained inside her home for hours before eventually surrendering to authorities. While still inside, she spoke to a reporter by phone. When asked why she carried out the act, she gave a response that shocked the nation, saying she didn't like Mondays and wanted to make the day more interesting. The statement quickly became one of the most widely remembered parts of the case, but later, she gave a very different explanation.
I don't sit here and plan on how to go out and people and stuff like that. That's just not, that's not how I am or who I am. And how it was presented, and it made me look like that.
There were allegations that Brenda Spencer got loaded it, planned all of this, and shot those people.
Yeah, and they made it look like, just for the fun of it and stuff, which is totally senseless. There's every day I live with, the knowledge that I took the lives of 2 men. I take responsibility for doing, the crime itself. I remember up to a certain point clearly, and that was, I guess, when the drugs started to kick in, because all that morning I had been drinking and taking the pills with the whiskey and stuff. Past a certain point, it just all kind of phases out.
However, official tests found no drugs or alcohol in her system at the time. As the investigation continued, more details about her background emerged. Reports pointed to long-term struggles, including emotional instability and social isolation.
She's very scared. She's very uncertain of her future. She's, I was almost in tears there beforehand. She's a frightened young girl.
In 1980, Spencer faced trial and pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including 2 counts of murder and assault with a deadly weapon. The court sentenced her to 25 years to life in prison. Over the years, she has appeared before parole boards multiple times.
Basically, for a second chance, everyone changes. Everyone changes, and I feel that everyone deserves a second chance. I blew it the first time, I wasn't going where I needed to go and getting the help I needed to get. And I would like a chance out there to lead a normal life.
But her requests have been denied, and she remains in prison. This case centers around Eric Smith, born in 1980 in New York. He grew up in a small town and often struggled socially. Those around him described him as isolated and frequently bullied because of his appearance, including his red hair and glasses. Over time, this isolation turned into emotional distress.
What we're saying is that he was developmentally delayed academically, walking, talking, things of that nature. His eyesight's bad. And that led to a low self-esteem, a feeling of no self-worth, and that coupled with the other kids in school picking on him because he looked funny, contributed to the mental disease that he is now suffering from.
But you know, a lot of people will hear your defense and roll their eyes and say, here we go again, another excuse defense.
We are not looking for an excuse as to why Eric did this horrible thing. We are looking for the truth.
And this is not an okay person, but that's a far cry from the legal conclusion that he's not responsible.
On August 2nd, 1993, in the small town of Savona, New York, a boy named Derek Roby left home to attend a summer program but never arrived. When he didn't return, concern quickly spread. A search began, and the small community was soon filled with fear as authorities tried to piece together what had happened.
Eric enticed him into a wooded area that's adjacent to McCoy Street, and once there, Derek Roby, by means of him as well as trauma to his head and body.
Said he knelt down by Derek, and right in the right part area where he had hit him with his rocks all these times, he said 3, hit him in the head and there was some there. He took the Kool-Aid and he did his hands like this. He said, so I took the Kool-Aid and I poured it into those cuts. Those are his words. I poured it into the cuts. I said, what forever did you do that for? I don't know, I just did.
As investigators worked through the case, Eric Smith began to draw attention. His behavior raised suspicion, and inconsistencies in his statements led to further questioning. Neighbors later spoke about a pattern in his behavior. They recalled disturbing actions from earlier years, suggesting that warning signs had been present.
They were both sleeping in the living room. My son took the recliner and Eric took the couch. And evidently my son fell asleep, but Eric didn't, because my son said he had woke up with a feeling something hot, and when he totally woke up, Eric had a lit laying on his nose. He his face with the cigarette.
When Eric was about 9, he used a clamp from a vacuum cleaner to slowly the cat to death.
In the days that followed, he admitted his involvement to his family, who then informed authorities. His confession, along with physical evidence, confirmed his role in the case.
I knew I had a problem.
He still understood his actions and should be held responsible. They described his emotions as ordinary, but his actions as extreme. In 1994, after hearing both sides, the jury reached a unanimous decision. He was found guilty of second-degree murder.
All rise. Foreman, please stand. So you find the defendant guilty of murder in the second degree?
Yes.
Note for the record that the jury's verdict is unanimous.
I don't in any way excuse him for what he's done, but I still love him. He's my son. I've lost my son. I've lost my life.
He was sentenced to 9 years to life in prison. Over the years, he remained incarcerated and appeared before parole boards multiple times. His requests were denied repeatedly due to the seriousness of the case and concerns about public safety. During this time, he participated in programs and expressed remorse.
Regardless of what labels they give me, doesn't mean that that's what I am. Mm-hmm. You can label me a monster, a cold-blooded, demon, incarnate. I don't care what the name you give me. Doesn't mean that that's who I am.
After nearly 3 decades, a major turning point came in 2021 when he was granted parole. He was officially released on February 1st, 2022. His release sparked mixed reactions.
Unfortunately, that ship has sailed, and that's a decision made by state parole, not by anybody else. So we can't influence that at this stage. So it's a tough day for any of us here in Steuben County law enforcement, particularly those of us who were around when this happened. I can't imagine what it's like for the Roby family today. The only thing that I can think of is just the concern for the Roby family. Obviously, they lost a child so long ago. They were the limited contact I had with them. They were great people, and this is just one more re-victimization.
Some believed that after many years, rehabilitation should be recognized. Others felt the severity of the case should outweigh any chance of release. Edmund Kemper became one of the most notorious criminal figures in the United States, with a case that unfolded over several years and revealed a steady progression of violent behavior.
Well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. I'm someone who has been a for almost 20 years.
He was born in 1948 in Burbank, California, and grew up in a tense household shaped by conflict between his parents. After their separation, he lived mainly with his mother, Lionel Kemper, whose harsh and critical attitude toward him created deep resentment.
You were involved in the campus because your mother worked there?
Yes. I was also involved in co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds, women, and had a very strong and violently outspoken position on men for much of my upbringing. My mother was a sick, angry, hungry, and very sad woman. I hated her, but I wanted to love my mother. And I watched the alcohol increase, I watched her social life drop off, I watched her get bizarre. She had terrible pain from her life. Earlier life, her upbringing, a failed marriage with my father. I'm a constant reminder of that failure. I hate to distill it down into such, into one-word realities like that. There's a lot that leads into that happening, but that is what happened. They represented not what my mother was, but what she liked, what she coveted, what was important to her, and I was destroying it.
Why did you actually kill the girls?
From an early age, he displayed troubling behavior, including violent thoughts and cruelty toward animals, signs often associated with later psychological instability. In 1964, he carried out his first known case, targeting his grandparents, Edmund and Maud Huey. He later explained that he was driven by curiosity about what it felt like to take a life and to have complete control in that moment. Instead of being sent to prison, he was placed in a secure psychiatric institution where he remained for several years under evaluation and treatment. In 1969, despite ongoing concerns from specialists, he was released after being considered rehabilitated. For a brief period, he appeared to reintegrate into society. However, the underlying issues that had shaped his earlier actions remained unresolved. Between 1972 and 1973, his actions escalated into a repeated pattern. He began targeting young women, often picking up hitchhikers around Santa Cruz, California.
Such a sticker.
My mother worked at the campus, and I had an A sticker on my car, and obvious access day or night to the campus. I was picking.
So how come they get in a car with somebody at that time?
She judged me not to be that guy. I didn't look like him. It was getting easier to do. I was getting better at it. I was getting less detectable. I started flaunting that invisibility, severing a human, 2 of them at night in front of my mother's residence, with her at home, my neighbors at home upstairs, their picture window open, the curtains open, 11 o'clock at night, the lights are on. All they have to do is walk by, look out, and I've had it.
How are you able to, in 1 minute, have someone's head in your hands, and very shortly thereafter?
Living through a fantasy, however that would relate to that severed. And then 5 minutes later, I'd put that away, and there'd be a knock on the door, and I'd put it away and answer the door, and the landlady would be there, and we'd discuss it.
Discuss what?
Reality. Her reality, not mine. Some people go crazy at that point. I felt it. It was one tweak. I mean, to just flip out and not know where I was. To be walking up the stairs with a camera bag It belonged to a young woman that had her severed head in it. Walking up to my apartment, past a happy young couple coming down the stairs who nodded and smiled at me as they went by. Good evening. And they're going out on a date where I'd love to be going. And I'm aware of both of these realities, and the distance between those two is so dramatic, so amazing, so violent, that really, I could feel the wheels squeaking inside. That was really pulling on it. And I imagine at that point some people break. But I didn't literally go insane. I didn't get lost.
He would gain their trust before taking them to isolated areas. As multiple individuals went missing, fear spread across the community. Victims during this period included Marianne Pesci, Anita Luchessa, Aiko Koo, Cindy Shaw, Rosalind Thorpe, and Alice Liu. Over time, his behavior became more frequent and structured, allowing him to avoid suspicion for months. Investigators later identified similarities in the cases that pointed to a single individual behind the incidents. In 1973, after years of built-up resentment, he turned his focus toward his own home and killed his mother, Lionel Kemper. Soon after, he also killed her friend. These events marked the final stage of his violent actions.
I just gone through a horrible experience with her roommate, and I was in shock because of that. I couldn't believe that it was that way. And I'm walking back there bewildered. I gotta go. I can't let her go. She's gonna tell on me. Everybody's gonna get me. She sees the blood on my hands. What are you doing? And she pulled back and she gasped. And I think, whoa, I don't want her to know what happened. I said, your friend got smart with me. She'd been getting really smart with me a lot, but I never hit her. I killed her, but I didn't hit her. I said, your friend got smart with me and I hit her. I think I broke her nose. You better come help. She's about to die. Why does she have to know that? I couldn't deal with telling her that. And when I attacked her, she didn't at first realize what was happening. It didn't go through. She had very heavy coveralls on. It knocked her right up into the lid of the car, but it didn't pierce the clothing. So it wasn't that swell a knife anyway. I went out and bought a pawn shop, huge, and I kept on just mindlessly attacking. She falls back into the trunk. I just a young woman, I slammed down the lid of the trunk. She isn't dead, she's dying. And I panicked. I thought, I just locked the car keys in it, because I can't find them in my pocket. Oh my God, I locked them in the trunk. I'm kicking on the trunk lid and yanking on it. Oh no, I don't believe this. I started to run, and I tripped over the gun that I'd had in my pants that I had totally forgotten was there. I stopped. I said, stop and think. I collected my wits. Check all your pockets. I picked the gun up. I stuck it back in my pants, now remembering I had one. I checked all my pockets, and there's the keys in the back pocket. I never put them in my back pocket.
Everyone makes mistakes, and that's what we have to hope for. The more mistakes they make, the better their chances.
I thought I was pretty slick, and went and tripped all over myself that first 2 years. The first 24 hours, there were 3 clear times I should have been busted, and I wasn't. Because 3 different individuals or 3 different groups of people got scared and minded their own business and looked the other way.
Some of the people who are committing, even as we speak, if they're doing it by themselves and they tell no one about it, they could go on undetected until they decided to stop. And the police wouldn't catch them unless we just happened to roll up on them while they were doing it.
Shortly after Ward, he made a decision that surprised investigators. He contacted authorities and confessed.
Why did you actually kill the girls?
My frustration, my inability to communicate socially. I wasn't impotent, but emotionally I was impotent. I was scared to death of failing in male-female relationships. I knew absolutely nothing about that whole area. Even if just sitting down and talking with a young lady. I need to be able to really communicate, and ironically enough, that's why I began picking people up. And I'm picking up young women, and I'm going a little bit farther each time. It's a daring kind of a thing. At first there wasn't a gun. I'm driving along. We go to a vulnerable place where there aren't people watching, where I could act out, and I say, no, I can't. And then a gun is in the car, hidden. And this craving, this awful, raging, eating feeling inside. I could feel it consuming my insides, this fantastic passion. It was overwhelming me. It was like drugs. It was like alcohol. A little isn't enough. At first it is. And as you adjust to that, psychologically and physically, you take more and more and more. It's the same process. So it finally came down to the thing of, do I dare bring this out? Already realizing if that comes out, something has to happen. It was going to happen. I didn't see it then, but it was going to happen. I was playing a dangerous game with a loaded gun that got us all. And that first in May of '72, when that gun was pulled out, I launched it out. I had it under my leg, out of sight, parallel to my leg in the seat. It was something that had been thought out in fantasy, acted out, felt out hundreds of times before it ever happened.
His detailed admissions helped connect him to the series of crimes that had unsettled California. Later that year, he was charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder. Although his defense raised questions about his mental state, evaluations concluded that he understood his actions. He was ultimately convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. During his time in prison, Kemper became a subject of interest for psychologists and criminal profilers. Known for his intelligence and ability to clearly explain his thoughts, he provided insight into his mindset and behavior. His case has since contributed significantly to the study of criminal psychology and profiling, making it one of the most examined cases of its kind. The story begins with Alysa Bustamante, born in 1994 in Missouri. Her early life was unstable, and she was raised by her grandparents due to family issues. Over time, she struggled with depression, self-harm, and a growing fixation on dark themes reflected in her writings and behavior. In the days leading up to the incident, she dug shallow holes in a wooded area near her home, something investigators later believed showed planning. On October 21st, 2009, in St. Martins, Missouri, Elizabeth Olton from the neighborhood went outside in the evening but did not return. As concern grew, a search began involving both the community and law enforcement. Investigators soon focused on the nearby woods. Around the same time, Bustamante's behavior raised suspicion. When questioned, she admitted her involvement. According to the investigation, she had taken the girl into the wooded area and later attempted to hide what happened.
Why did you dig that hole? Was that for her? When did you dig the hole? You dug it ahead of time, didn't you?
I dug that hole, I'd rather say.
Before you played with her?
Yes.
When we go and get the body here, there'll be an autopsy. And it doesn't matter, I work a lot of homicides. It doesn't matter whether the body's or not. They'll go through and do an autopsy.
Okay.
And they will discover every injury on her body and the cause of death. And I understand you say she fell, and that's why she died. However, they will know from the autopsy if she was shot, if she was hit in the head, if her throat was. They will know all of that from the autopsy. So we need to know the truth, because at the end of the autopsy, they will know exactly how she died.
Listen,
I think you dug the hole ahead of time because you knew you were in Elizabeth. I think you tried to dig the hole, like I said, and realized it was too hard to dig down that far. And I think you got Elizabeth out there. They knew you were going to kill her. And then you cut her throat. Is that what happened?
yes.
What did you use to cut her throat with? A pocket knife, a kitchen knife.
Kitchen knife.
Okay. Where's that kitchen knife now?
The sink.
As the case unfolded, authorities discovered troubling evidence. Bustamante had written about the act in her journal in a detached manner. Her past behavior and online activities suggested this wasn't a sudden decision, but something building over time. A former friend later exposed what she was really like.
She kind of just took me off to the side randomly, and she's like, you know, I wonder what it would be like to kill somebody.
She was arrested and charged, and despite her age, the court decided she would be tried as an adult, sparking national debate. As the trial approached, her lawyers faced a critical decision. At the time, the law allowed life without parole for such cases, and there was uncertainty about whether that would change. Her defense team advised accepting a plea deal to avoid the risk of a harsher sentence. Years later, she explained why she made that decision.
Basically, the main reason for accepting the offer was to avoid the absolute certainty of life without parole. If there was another option, then there would have been no reason to have accepted that offer.
Despite arguments that she was under pressure and may not have fully considered her options, she admitted she understood what was happening at the time.
You and your lawyers knew that they could present evidence and argue for the punishment that you all thought was appropriate.
Yes.
And that the state could present evidence and argue for the punishment that the state thought was appropriate.
Yes.
And you knew and understood those things at the time that you accepted the plea agreement.
Yes.
In 2012, she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and armed criminal action. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole, along with an additional sentence. Some believe her mental health and background should be considered for rehabilitation, while others argue that the level of planning justifies the sentence. Craig Price, often referred to as the Warwick Slasher, was born in 1973 in Warwick, Rhode Island. He grew up in a quiet neighborhood, but over time, troubling signs began to appear. Reports later suggested early aggressive behavior, including cruelty toward animals and increasing anger. He also struggled socially and faced bullying, which added to his isolation. In 1987, a woman named Rebecca Spencer, age 27, was found dead inside her home near where Price lived. The case shocked the neighborhood, but investigators were unable to identify a suspect, and it eventually went cold. Less than 2 years later, on September 1st, 1989, the situation escalated. Price entered another nearby home belonging to Joan Heaton. Inside were Joan and her 2 daughters, Jennifer and Melissa. By the end of that night, all 3 had lost their lives. Fear spread quickly across the community, as the person responsible remained unknown. As the investigation intensified, suspicion turned toward Price. His behavior raised concern, and information from witnesses, along with inconsistencies in his statements, led to further questioning. On September 5th, 1989, he was arrested. He later admitted his involvement in the recent incident and the earlier unsolved case.
Yeah, and then things just got hectic after that. What did she say to you when she saw you, Craig? She didn't say anything. She was just like trying to, like, as soon as she seen me, like run the other way, break the other way. Okay. And I grabbed her.
What happened then?
So I was just like trying to.
Do you remember one of the girls trying to get to the phone?
I don't know. She said, "Get to the phone, get to the phone." She was just saying that, "Get to the phone." She didn't say the name, but she said.
Did you remember one of the girls trying to get to the phone?
No, she was just standing at the side of the wall. And I was running back to the window, back and forth to see if the police were coming or something like that.
If you can remember, how many knives did you use?
I don't know, a lot. About 6, I think, maybe.
Okay.
And she bit me. You can see the mark right there. She bit me there, and I bit her back. So then I was like, oh, what the hell? I ran to, like, the kitchen. On top of the refrigerator was a knife. And I just...
Then what did you do?
Grabbed all the knives and everything that I could see, and then put them in a towel, then in the bag.
Did you get the towel in the bag from inside the house?
Yeah, in the bathroom.
Okay.
And I just put everything in a bag. I even got the garbage bag out of the bathroom. When you found that bag, did you find all Dixie cups and everything in it? I think they did. Yeah, that was from their house. How did you hurt your hand? When I was I guess I got careless or something. And then I had my own finger. Okay. Okay, you covered the mother. Do you remember what you covered the other children with? The rug. The rug. Okay. All right. Why did you cover them? Because I didn't want to look at that. All right, so you put the clothes in the attic, you put the knives in the shed. What else do you do? Live with guilt till I get caught. Glad I got caught for it. Are you? If you hurt Becky Spencer, would you want to be caught for that? Yeah, if I did, but I didn't. You'll see when you get your reports back.
Investigators noted that he showed little visible emotion during the confession. At the time, his case drew national attention not only because of the crimes, but also because of his age. It raised serious questions about whether someone in his position could fully understand the consequences of such actions, and how the justice system should respond. During questioning, Price pointed to past experiences, including bullying and racism, as factors that had affected him over time. Experts later examined his mental condition. Some believed he suffered from serious psychological issues, while others concluded he understood his actions. A major concern remained that without proper treatment, there was a risk of continued harmful behavior.
I have no doubt that if he had ever been released, he would have done something like this again.
One of the victim's family members later shared his grief and that Craig Price should never be out of prison.
Bye.
Looks like it feels like it was like yesterday, even though it's been 27 years.
Yes. It sure does. She enjoyed hanging with her friends, and she enjoyed her children. She worked hard to, make a better life for her children than we had as kids. My sister, and he butchered her entire family. And I don't believe any time in the prison is going to stop him from doing it again once he's released. It's just ridiculous that, he could get good time after all he's done since he's been in prison. I don't believe that no matter what happens, that somebody else will not pay the price of him being released from prison. They should try everything they can to keep him behind bars so that nobody else pays the price that both Becky and the Heatons did.
What is it that you want people to remember about Becky?
Well, that, she died way too young, and she didn't get to see her kids grow up, and she didn't get to live a life. That was taken from her by Craig Price.
In September 1989, he appeared in court and admitted responsibility. Because of how the law classified him at the time, he was initially placed in a juvenile facility until the age of 21. This outcome caused a strong reaction, with many believing it did not reflect the seriousness of the case.
Just because he was at the time, he wasn't just some poor little innocent kid that went astray. He killed 4 people. 1, and then 2 years later, 3 more, and 2 of them were children.
The case led to changes in Rhode Island law, allowing individuals in similar situations to be tried as adults, although those changes did not apply to him. Community groups also formed, opposing his release and raising concerns about public safety.
Clearly, this person belongs in jail. He has no regard for society. He clearly has no regard for his fellow human beings, going back to his initial charges of murder, and he deserves to be in jail.
While in custody, his behavior remained a major issue.
Get me out of state. That's what I want to do.
When you get out,
get off my yo, that's what you can do. Get off my
He refused psychological evaluation and treatment, even when ordered by the court, which led to additional legal consequences. Over time, he was involved in multiple violent incidents involving others in the facility. In 2017, he attacked an inmate, Joshua Davis, using a homemade weapon.
He opened the door and stabbed me in the chest, which knocks me down. And then he just jumped on me and stabbed me in the chest, in the head, twice in the back, twice on this side, in the spine, on the neck, and then lower on the spine also. And then he chased me out after I got out and attacked me again in the day room. And it took 2 officers and 2 inmates to pull him off. We'd never had any bad words. I mean, I've been there for about 8 months, and I mean, the most I spoke to him was probably 2 or 3 words at a time when he was in his cell. I mean, in the 8 months I've been there, he had a couple arguments with the captain or another officer, but never amounted to violence. So, but I didn't even know about his past until after all this came out. The guards kind of kept him at bay because he would get real loud and stuff. He's exceptional at legal work, and he's an accomplished martial artist, and everybody kind of knows that, you know, but he's normally real calm. But when you incur more and more and more time and you keep with the violent behavior, you're going to get out there and most likely be a menace out there. Somebody's going to get harmed again. If an innocent person is out there who's not even in prison for anything, yeah, I fear for them. I fear for them. I'm a pretty strong-willed person, so I mean, I put it in God's hands and didn't think about revenge. I mean, I did at first, and I let it go, and I moved on. I mean, I've tried to move on.
These actions resulted in new charges, including assault, extending his time in prison beyond the original sentence. In the early 1990s, further convictions added to his sentence, ensuring he would remain incarcerated well beyond his initial release date.
He's exceptional at legal work, and he's an accomplished martial artist, and everybody kind of knows that, you know, but he's normally real calm.
That's a pretty serious case. He's been an inmate multiple times. If he received a lengthy period of incarceration in Florida, that would be great. I don't sit here and hope somebody gets hurt so Craig Price stays in jail. But I dread the day he gets out. So sure, I hope he never gets out.
In later years, he was transferred to facilities outside Rhode Island due to ongoing concerns about his behavior. Throughout his incarceration, Price has remained a highly controversial figure. Reports indicated he showed little consistent remorse, and repeated incidents in custody raised doubts about the possibility of rehabilitation.
He's in a secure environment, and he does all this. What's he going to do when he can walk around the streets, the neighborhoods, with nobody watching him, nobody telling him what to do? What do you think he's going to do? He's going to do what Craig Price does.
In 2019, he received an additional 25-year sentence related to another incident involving an inmate, further extending his time in prison. Today, he remains incarcerated in Rhode Island, serving multiple sentences. The story begins with Michael Hernandez, born in Miami, Florida. He was known as a bright and academically strong student, enrolled in a gifted program, and often seen as polite and well-behaved. To most people around him, he appeared normal. However, over time, certain behaviors began to raise concern. As he grew older, he developed a strong interest in violent crime and became deeply focused on serial killers. He spent time studying their lives and methods, and this interest slowly turned into something more serious. Later in court, his father took the stand and firmly denied that his son had any obsession with serial killers.
It doesn't concern you that your son is fascinated, continue to be fascinated, with serial and music that screams out for Hitler.
I don't see that he's fascinated with serial killers. And just one song doesn't make a man.
But investigations revealed that he kept journals filled with disturbing thoughts, along with lists and plans that suggested he had been thinking about harming others well in advance. In early 2004, his thoughts turned into action. One morning at Southwood Middle School in Miami, he approached a male classmate, Jamie Goof. The two were familiar with each other, which made what happened next even more shocking. He led Goof into a school bathroom before classes began. Inside, he carried out a planned attack using a weapon he had brought with him. After the incident, authorities quickly identified him as the suspect. He was taken into custody and later admitted to what he had done. Investigators found evidence showing that the act had been planned, including writings and previous attempts that had not succeeded. The case quickly gained national attention. Some argued that the crime was deliberate and carefully prepared.
A life sentence could be appropriate because he is the worst of the worst.
While his mother focused on his mental state, claiming he was not fully responsible due to psychological issues.
Well, as his mother, my fondest hope would be that
he get a more appropriate sentence, that he would be able to get the help that he needs.
In 2008, the court found him guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The decision sparked debate, especially around how the justice system should handle offenders at such a stage of life and whether rehabilitation should play a role.
Children should not be getting life in prison as for something they do when they're 14 years old. They should get help, not punishment.
Years later, changes in U.S. law led to a new sentencing hearing. During this process, Hernandez expressed regret.
First and foremost, I wanted to apologize to Jamie, and I'm sorry for what I did to him. And it hurts me how sensitive it was, because he was always such a good friend to me. I had to learn over years how wrong it was, what I did, and how much pain I caused you. I'm sorry. And I wanted to apologize to his family, to his mother, and his father, because I didn't always feel this way.
How'd you muster up those tears?
I feel horrible about what I did.
You had any tears coming down your face?
Yes, I had tears coming down my face.
Because I haven't seen you wipe your nose or wipe an eye.
He also addressed his sister, whom he had previously listed as a potential victim.
I love you, and I had absolutely no intent to ever do anything to you. I was mad one day. That's all it was.
Then, a former classmate took the stand, someone who had once been on his hit list. This is how he responded to the apology.
I don't believe that he really underwent any. It's very easy to be apologetic and remorseful when your freedom is on the line. So this crime occurred when I was approximately 13 years of age, which is a very formative age, and this was a very traumatic and intense situation for any human being to go through, much less a teenager or preteen.
The attorney then confronted him with a recorded prison call that added a new layer to the case.
Well, why don't you practice your weekend learning how to cry?
Oh my God. God, man, I'm gonna have to myself.
I'm not what those calls depict. And so I didn't realize how bad they were.
How'd you muster up those tears?
I feel horrible about what I did.
Yeah, so horrible to say, I may have to stab myself. Try and muster up some emotion, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Because as you sit here today, you cry on cue. That's what you do.
No, ma'am.
You know what was stupid? What was stupid was you didn't think that I was smart enough to listen to your calls.
But the court reviewed additional evidence and ultimately decided to uphold a life sentence. In 2021, at the age of 31, Hernandez died in prison. Reports later confirmed that his death was linked to health complications. 2 random attacks took place months apart, and police later discovered the culprit was the same person. The story begins with James Fairweather, who grew up in Colchester, Essex. In his early years, he appeared quiet and unremarkable, but over time his behavior began to shift. He struggled in school, became increasingly withdrawn, and developed a strong fascination with violent crime and serial killers. By early 2014, those thoughts had escalated. He had already been involved in criminal activity, and investigators later found that he had been thinking about harming others well before any incident took place. On March 29, 2014, the first attack occurred. The victim was James Atfield, a 33-year-old man who was spending time in a local park. The incident appeared random and immediately shocked the community. Police launched an investigation, but at the time, there were no clear leads. For weeks, the case remained unsolved. Then, on June 17, 2014, a second incident took place. This time, the victim was Nahid Almanea, a 31-year-old student who was walking toward the University of Essex. Like the first case, it appeared sudden and unprovoked. Fear quickly spread across Colchester, as residents realized the possibility that the 2 incidents could be connected. Police worked extensively, interviewing witnesses and reviewing evidence, but the investigation struggled to identify a suspect. For a period, uncertainty remained, and the community stayed on edge.
The investigation was very thorough. It was always described as it was a painstaking investigation with very, very few forensic opportunities. We've heard how the defendant took specific steps to make sure that, in terms of he left very little in the way of forensic evidence, and how he discarded in terms of items that would implicate him in terms of to both
The case took a turning point. A passerby, Michelle Sadler, spotted suspicious behavior near the same location and acted immediately. Her vigilance stopped what could have been another tragedy. Later, in her interview, she described that moment in detail.
Obviously I got close enough, so when he looked at me, I looked back at him, felt really, really sort of scared, panicked. I turned around, went back on where I was, and that's when I obviously decided I needed to call the police, but I wasn't 100% certain because I thought, you know, if he hasn't done anything, do I or don't I?
And you could have been just seconds away from...
Yeah, if I'd have gone in 5 minutes later, which is what I already knew, where he was in that bush, I know he'd have got me from behind, and I know that, and yeah, that's the most horrific part, you know, obviously reading that in the statements, what's come out in court. Yeah, I'm just very, very lucky to be here. Yeah.
When police arrived, they found Fairweather carrying a weapon and acting unusually. He was taken into custody. During questioning, he admitted responsibility for both incidents. He also revealed that he had been looking for another victim at the time he was stopped, confirming that the situation could have continued if he had not been reported. As the investigation unfolded, Fairweather claimed he was under the influence of dark forces, saying voices in his head had driven his actions.
Some voices were talking to me, you need to make a sacrifice or we're going to come and get you, you need to do it. And I saw him, it was laying on the grass, like that, it was like that, just fast asleep, where he was drunk. Then he goes, he's the one, do it. So I went up to him, can I stand up? Like, yes. Went up to him, stood over like that, not helping that. So I did him first there. I've done it a few times. While I was doing that, my voices were laughing and laughing and laughing louder and louder.
But experts later challenged this, suggesting his actions were more deliberate. Prosecutors also presented evidence of his long-standing obsession with serial killers, arguing that this played a role in his behavior. The case went to trial in 2016. Fairweather admitted to the acts, but claimed reduced responsibility. The prosecution argued that the incidents were planned and intentional. After reviewing the evidence, the jury found him guilty on both counts. Following the verdict, police delivered statements on behalf of the victims' families, describing the loss and the reality they continue to live with.
On March 29, 2014, our lives were changed forever when my kind and brave son Jim was brutally killed. He had been through so much already, having fought hard to overcome the effects of brain damage suffered when he was struck by a car. He didn't deserve to die.
He was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 27 years. Daniel Bartlam was born in 1996 in Nottinghamshire and grew up in what appeared to be a stable household. However, after his parents separated, his life changed significantly. Financial pressure followed, and he had to adjust to a new school and environment. Around this period, noticeable changes in his behavior began to emerge. He developed a strong interest in violent films and crime-based content, and over time, this interest became more intense. At school, he showed emotional instability and had troubling outbursts. He was assessed for his mental state, but was considered a low risk, and no major intervention followed. In the weeks leading up to the incident, he began planning what would happen. Investigators later discovered a deleted story on his computer that closely mirrored the real events, suggesting clear premeditation. On April 24, 2011, inside his home in Red Hill, Nottingham, he attacked his mother, Jacqueline Bartlam. Afterward, he attempted to cover up the act by setting a fire and claiming that an unknown intruder was responsible. When authorities arrived, he repeated this version of events. However, investigators quickly identified inconsistencies. Digital evidence, along with his timeline and behavior, contradicted his claims. The discovery of his written story and online activity became key evidence in the case.
Circumstances of this crime are both shocking and difficult to comprehend. We now know that Daniel Bartlam planned to kill his mum. He then executed the killing in a violent attack on her, and then he took a number of steps to try and cover this up by both burning her body and then lying consistently throughout the police investigation. It was only after we spoke to other witnesses that we realised his account was not consistent, and he was then arrested. Following his arrest, we reviewed his computer and found that it deleted a story where a character called Daniel Bartlam killed his mother in exactly the same circumstances. As I've said, this is a shocking investigation and has shocked me personally, but the biggest impact is bound to be on Daniel's family, Daniel and Jacqueline's family. Having spent time with them throughout the investigation and the subsequent proceedings, it's fair to say that they probably never come to terms with what's happened to them. There's no evidence to suggest Jackie was anything other than a loving mum and loved and supported Daniel throughout his life.
The case went to trial at Nottingham Crown Court. During proceedings, he denied and claimed he had lost control during an argument. The prosecution, however, argued that the act was planned, supported by the digital evidence, and his attempt to stage the scene. In February 2012, the jury found him guilty of murder, rejecting his defense. At sentencing, the judge described the act as senseless and highlighted the level of planning involved, noting that it appeared he had tried to carry out what he believed was a perfect crime. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 16 years before eligibility for release. Lionel Tate became one of the most widely debated figures in U.S. criminal justice, with a case that unfolded over several years and raised major questions about sentencing and responsibility. He was born on January 30th, 1987 in Broward County, Florida. On July 28, 1999, an incident occurred inside his home involving Tiffany Unick, who was there under supervision. She suffered serious injuries during the encounter. When authorities arrived, Tate initially claimed the situation was accidental. As the investigation continued, officials concluded that the circumstances did not match a simple accident. A grand jury later indicted him, and prosecutors decided to charge him as an adult with first-degree murder. Before the trial began, a plea deal was offered that would have resulted in a far lighter sentence, including time in a juvenile facility and probation. His defense team rejected the offer, believing there was a strong chance of acquittal. The trial took place in 2001 and received widespread attention. The defense argued that he had been imitating wrestling moves and did not intend to cause serious harm. The prosecution, however, argued that he was responsible for his actions.
Broward County grand jury has met in the investigation of the death of Tiffany Unick and has voted to indict the defendant, Lionel Tate, for first-degree murder. They had an opportunity to indict him for something lesser, such as a second-degree murder charge, but they came back with an indictment for first-degree murder.
The jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. Under Florida law at the time, this resulted in a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. The decision made him one of the youngest individuals in modern U.S. history to receive such a sentence. The verdict sparked national and international debate. Many questioned whether such a severe punishment was appropriate, including both jurors and prosecutors.
Throwing him in jail for the rest of his life is not helping him. It's not helping society. It's certainly not helping, Tiffany Unick.
I realized that Tiffany Unick had justice, but I made no secret by the fact that I found life in prison with no parole inappropriate as a sentence.
While the judge said that it was not his choice, but the law.
The statute said simply a conviction for murder in the first degree is a mandatory life sentence. I had no options but to follow the law and sentence Lionel Tate to what dictated.
In 2003, the case took a major turn.
We come to do what is necessary to lead to justice for Lionel Tate and justice for the juvenile justice system.
An appellate court overturned the conviction, ruling that his mental competency had not been properly evaluated and that he may not have fully understood the consequences of rejecting the earlier plea deal. As a result, his conviction was vacated and he was released under strict supervision, including house arrest. However, in 2005, he was arrested again for violating probation and for involvement in another incident. This brought him back into the legal system. In 2006, he accepted a plea agreement and received a 30-year prison sentence, along with an additional sentence to run at the same time. Appeals followed, but the sentence remained in place. Big thanks to our viewers for joining the courtroom journey with us. Your interest in the stories of justice is what keeps our channel alive.